The NSDA has bad topics.
And that is especially bad because the two primary formats in high school debate are public forum and Lincoln Douglas, which do not allow you to read plans and therefore do not allow you to parametricize.
And they're the ones that write the topics for both of those formats.
Yeah, and to be fair, people do vote on the topics, but
the phrasings are terrible.
Yeah, well, the phrasings are terrible, and if you have two terrible topics, like...
Right, but you don't vote on the phrasing.
Yeah, oh
right?
Yeah.
So it's not like, you can't be like,
Which, by the way,
this.
In college you do.
Yeah.
For the Lincoln Douglas topic, it's extensive how much they go through, like, hey, well, what about this wording? And people will comment and be like, well, actually, I think that wording indicates this, like, do we want that? And then they'll have a bunch of more. It's so big. It's so long to get through it. But, so just so that this isn't abstract, we're going to read
No. So let's start with, Let's start with what we mean by bad, and then we'll go into the examples of how they have met that. Like what happens when a topic is bad?
When a topic is bad, these aren't all requirements, but these are all examples of what happens.
Yeah.
1, it is not clear what the affirmative and negative ground is based on research. 2, one side, it is clear what the ground is, and one side has drastically more ground than the other side.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of whether tournament results end up bearing that out.
Yeah.
Okay, because whatever. People can be bad at debate. 3, it's not clear even what the sort of the resolutional status quo difference is. Mm-hmm. And I think that'll be really clear when we look at one of the most recent examples.
Yeah. So the affirmative... Okay, what it does is your topic should have one of two goals in mind. Can't be both. When you write a topic, either what you are trying to accomplish... Let's start with 1. First thing you could be trying to accomplish is to increase the amount of research and increase the knowledge base that the community has around this topic. This is how policy topics are written. This is how Lincoln Douglas topics are written.
In college.
In college. But the idea is that the topics are written broadly to sort of contain the affirmative in some ways, but beyond that, they have a lot of leeway with how they can apply what is being talked about. Change immigration policy.
Can I real quick touch, because I don't know if you even know, the actual process for how LD resolutions get picked every year?
Sure, go ahead.
So just in college, here's how it works. For about half the year, there's an open period where people are asked to write topic papers, right? So you write a research paper that says, here's what I think a topic area should be. Mm-hmm. Okay? Criminal justice, let's say. Criminal justice reform was 2 years ago.
Cybersecurity.
Yes. You write a ton of stuff, blah, 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 here's what. And then at the end, you're required to say, and here's 5 example resolutions that could come out of this topic, right? And these come from all kinds of different schools. You're allowed to submit multiple of them, blah, 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 blah. Then everyone from the community or a panel vote on those topics, right? And they say, cool, we're going to be doing cybersecurity or we're going to be doing police reform. Mm-hmm. Once that happens, then the topic committee comes together and says, okay, let's start putting together a bunch of resolutions. Right. Those get voted on. Yeah. Then they do the wording and rework the wording until people are satisfied, whatever, and then that's the topic, right?
Yeah.
So there was a clear lit base because someone had to write a literature paper, like a research paper, a lit review effectively on the topic to give you examples. And then so many iterations of fixing the topic occur. And to be fair, it's a little easier in college because there might be 20 universities who care, 30 universities who care, right? Yeah. And those people are all talking on Facebook, but in the national high school circuit, there might be 300.
Yeah, well, so going back to what I was saying is there's 2 ways to approach a topic. One way is to say, here's what we want the teams to say. Here's what we want their arguments to be. That, I think, is pretty bad in a research-focused,
I think it's almost never
evidentiary format of debate, and it's almost never done in practice. But I think that's how these people are writing these topics.
Oh, yeah, I meant in college, sorry.
Right, never done in college. On the other hand, right, there's the, well, here's what we want people to gain an education on, and we want to not tell them what they should say because we want them to research and find new things to say, find out what, and through a year of different people proposing different Cyber Command actions or whatever, you learn more about what Cyber Command can do and what it's limited in doing and blah, blah, blah. That's the idea behind it. The problem with NSDA topics, I think, stems from the fact that they want to allow creativity in what people advocate for, but the topics are not written in a way that they're phrased in ways that where you reach an amount of research where now the entire topic falls apart, where now this topic makes no sense, and then they don't like topicality, they don't like weird unfair arguments, so then their only response is like, well, yeah, well, that's not what you're supposed to be advocating for. But it's like, but that's the topic you wrote. Those are the words you wrote down. It's like, well, that's sort of not what you're supposed to be arguing. You're supposed to be arguing one of these 6 things. And it's like, why don't you just make it argue one of these 6 things? And the problem is that it stems from the crossfire formatting. The crossfire is like, here is this issue that the public has a debate on and how they understand it. Let's get a person to represent one side. Let's get a person to represent the other. And those people are beholden to explaining the issue the way that some constituent sees it, right? But that's not the case in a debate. When I'm the affirmative on...
The current topic?
Well, I don't know, whatever.
Sure, yeah. So the recent topic that I hate, resolved, the United States federal government should enforce antitrust regulations on technology
If this was on CNN, there would be one person on there who's just like, I don't like tech giants, and here's why we should enforce this stuff. And the other side's like, but I love capitalism.
I hate the big government.
The big government bad. And basically one side saying vote Democrat and the other side saying vote Republican, because people's political views tend to be clumped together even when they don't logically make sense, right? Like, the pro-regulation person is more likely to be pro-choice, and the anti-regulation person is more likely to be pro-life. Like, what do those things have to do with each other? Nothing. They just come as pre-packaged political party ideals, right? That's not the way debate works. Why should I pretend to be a Republican because I'm on the affirmative, right? Isn't it a better application of what debate is about for me to find the actual things that I feel are valid about this side of the debate? But then what that does is, when you're not just advocating for what this archetype wants and you're trying to find what you think is good about it and what you think is redeemable about each side, it breaks away from what the common discourse on it is, because...
Well, it's also how on the extreme end you get to things like people doing chaos.
Right. Yeah. But so, let's talk about... This has all been really abstract. Let's talk about some topics and, like, why their phrasing leads to problems.
Okay, let's start with this first one. Just read it again. Resolved, the United States federal government should enforce antitrust regulations on technology giants. Do you want to start with problems with it that are just general, and I can go more specific?
The reason
from the
that
research?
resolution is phrased that way, and to not trying to say NSDA is the NSDA is bad. I'm saying their topics have problems. I'm sure they're brilliant people who mean well. The reason why that's phrased that way is because they're trying to appeal to a really wide base of people, including middle school children. And they want them to be able to understand what the topic is supposed to be. So they can't get too specific and they can't use too technical a language. But here's the problem with those words. Paul?
So, regulate. Or let me get these. Is it regulate?
Enforce.
But no. But regulations. Sorry, that's the word. So it says enforce regulations. And I think that a lot of people on Face, especially people who haven't done debate research or who aren't involved in political science or law, don't know what a regulation is, right? And I think the topic might not have even intended this, right? No. But to be very clear for all of you, and you can verify this in research, I promise you, these cards exist. One of them is by the EPA. Regulations and laws are two completely different things, okay? Congress passes laws, right, which say that, like, X is illegal or X is required. And so, for example, when Congress passes a law that says that companies need to curb their emissions by 30% or something, that is then passed down to a regulatory agency. In that instance, it would be passed down to the Environmental Protection Agency. The Environmental Protection Agency then comes up with completely distinct and on their own mandatory requirements, and regulations, to be clear, are mandatory requirements. They are not optional. That say, okay, well, they need to get down to 30. Here's how they're going to do that. You have to start doing less fossil fuels. You have to not dump in rivers, whatever it may be, right? You require a specific actual regulation. And you can see this legally codified if you think I'm just like, if this is just a technical thing. It's not. There's what's called the U.S. Code, right? And when people say the U.S. Code, what they're talking about is the Code of Statutes, right? Which are the laws that were passed. But the regulations are stored in a completely different database, which is called the CFR, the Code of Federal Regulations, and that has like 20 titles or 22 titles maybe in it. And you can see every regulation and then say, it tells you what law did they get their power from, right? But they're two completely different things, which means for this topic, for instance, there's 2 entire titles, which are dozens of pages long, of regulations. So when it says should enforce regulations, what does that mean?
Well, so real quick to recap, a regulation can't make something illegal. Antitrust laws and like monopolies being illegal are made illegal by laws. So what that means is that this resolution cannot change the legal status of anything. It can't make something that's currently legal illegal or vice versa. And then the question becomes of enforce regulations. If it was create regulations, then you could say, okay, they can change how they mandate things be followed. But when you say enforce regulations, that means that you are just increasing the punishment or like following through
if
more.
There was an exemption or if it wasn't previously applied to this category, tech giants, which we'll get into in a second.
Right. It should now be. Right, which then that makes the entire debate about a very specific and very weird question, which is there's antitrust laws. Those laws have a certain set of regulations that say they are empowered by antitrust laws. So you take those regulations and then you decide which of those regulations say tech giants are exempt, and then you pick one or more of those and apply those regulations to the tech giants which were previously exempt, which creates several problems because 1, who the fuck cares? 2, what is a tech giant? There's not a
I don't even want to get there yet.
But there's not a regulation that says tech giants are exempt.
Let's stay for a second.
Yeah.
On regulations.
Sure.
Because I know this might be minutiae, this might be down, but I really want to go into depth here. Let's say you're thinking at home, Paul, that might be legally what regulations means, but surely what the topic meant was generically they should be regulated. That is so much worse than the alternative, right? Because in that world, the advocates to defend a new organization should be made that is in charge of regulating them, right? They get to defend a new law should be passed. A new requirement should exist for these companies that doesn't currently exist, right? Because it's generic. If you do it the other way around, let's pretend we focused in on regulations are in fact regulations as codified in the CFR. That creates a literature base, which is important, right? We can only apply things that exist in the CFR as of right now, but there's like 800 of them. Like, I literally couldn't even... I spent hours trying to just find them and, like, understand a regulation in specific, right? The minutiae there is so insane. And to be clear, it doesn't say regulation. It says regulations. Regulations is plural, which means it has to be at least 2. Which then begs the question, does the affirmative get to specify the 2 that are applied, or does the affirmative have to defend all 800 or whatever regulations that exist, or just generically? And I think this is really the problem with this debate, because if the AF gets to parametricize, and I've seen some of this on the most recent topic, I can't remember what topic people were just debating at CFL, rehabilitation versus whatever, right? I've seen some people whose apps were like, and we'll defend these 2 specific kinds of rehabilitation: CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and drug rehab or whatever, right? If you get to do that with the CFR, the regulations, and you get to say it's just these 2 regulations, you can specify the 2 that don't actually do anything to the companies to break them up. You could, like, so right now, this just, yesterday, I just sent this to students. Everyone should be checking this out. For the first time, the resolution happened. Qualcomm had antitrust enforcement regulations applied against them yesterday, right? That said a bunch of things like, oh, you can't, like, hyper-specific things. You can't grant licensees in this specific format and collect royalties or whatever, right? But one of the last things that was applied was per this existing regulation, and for the next 8 months, you have to be monitored by this FTC committee. Why can't the app just specify to Apple will be monitored by this committee for 8 months? And then go for, doesn't change Apple in any way, but if Apple did do something bad, we win, right?
Because the answer you get to that is because that's not what the spirit of the resolution is. But the problem, like, okay, then why don't you just tell me what the spirit of the resolution is? Why don't you just say, this is what the AF must defend? If that's what it's going to come down to.
And let's go to the opposite end real quick.
Yeah.
Forget we'll just do 1 regulation or 2 regulations because it's regulations. AF has to defend every regulation.
Yeah.
The ones that don't even apply to them. First off, none of them apply to them now.
Right. That's the
Obviously,
whole point. You're enforcing it against them. That's not being enforced right now.
And what that brings me to that I've actually this is definitely part of this, and I think it's really important, is this is why one of the, I think, the biggest problems with PF is because plans don't exist, and therefore
parametricizing.
Well, yes, but more importantly, inherency
Yeah.
doesn't exist. In policy debate, and in parley debate, and LG debate in college, if your plan is already happening,
you don't get to defend
you
it
don't
on
get to do it,
behalf.
obviously. But the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, who would be the people regulating antitrust, because they always have, they were invented to regulate antitrust, in February of this year, created a special task force for monitoring tech giants.
It's not the only...
And, as of yesterday, are applying it.
It's not the
So the
only
app isn't
time...
the quo.
Yeah, this is not the only time. Public Forum has status quo apps all the time. And then it's just like... Because that's the way Crossfire worked. Crossfire is one side defends this, the other side defends that. So who cares what is or is not status quo, right? But that's why the negative can go first, because the idea of defending or rejecting the status quo is not really, like, deeply ingrained in public forum. But, like, that just is not
Go
a
to
good...
tech giants real quick.
Yeah.
Remember our 2 scenarios. Either all the regulations or specifying just some of them. Those are the only things you could do. It's literally not possible. No one's going to be like, we're going to do 80 of them, right? It's going to be 2,
right, but
or
I
it's
mean,
going to be all of them.
There's completely different companies.
Who is a tech giant?
1, who is a tech giant? And 2, is there a regulation that applies to Sony and Viacom?
Qualcomm.
Qualcomm,
none of you even, I would wager, 99% of you have no idea who Qualcomm is.
Right.
Do you know who Qualcomm is off the top of your head?
Yeah.
Right? Qualcomm makes almost all of the CPUs for phones, right, that you use. Snapdragon CPUs, whatever, right? No one was thinking of Qualcomm when they wrote this topic. Mm-hmm. They were thinking of Facebook. They were thinking of Google. They were thinking of maybe Apple,
Microsoft.
right? Yeah, whoever. But now it's like, so you could write an AF case that is entirely about tech manufacturers. Yeah. You could write one that is entirely about Uber.
Yeah.
You could write one about Lyft or whoever.
Right, and that's the thing. Like, there's, like, what regulation applies equally to the people who make the chips inside phones, Uber, and Instagram? Like those, they function in very different ways. Like, why would... What regulation are we imagining
Also,
is
how
applying
about
to all of them?
some of those are free? Like, this is the thing with Facebook
Yeah.
where people are talking about, like, oh, antitrust law, right? The reason they haven't and can't thus far is because the lit base for antitrust law historically has been consumer benefit, right? And so, well, Facebook,
By keeping the price
what
down,
it's
but
doing,
the price is already free.
Yeah, it's already free.
Yeah.
How are they hurting? Oh, well, but now all the ads are on. Like, people are on Google's case because, like, well, you have to do ads through Google because they're so successful at it and whatnot. It's like,
Do you want to jump to another topic because I think we're stuck on this too long. Find the AUMF topic. I hated that one.
that was a funny topic. Let me see. That was PF, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
That one I'm gonna go on the rant for. I think I have them memorized. I think it's resolve the current AUMF. On balance, the current authorization for use of military force grants the president too much power.
Gives too much power to the president.
Gives too much
March
power to the
2018.
president. Great. Wow. What an awful topic. The current AUMF gives too much power to the president. So,
How long? I know where you're going.
how long did I research this before the topic broke apart is what you're asking.
Yeah, exactly.
Day 2.
Day 2.
So, there's something called the Congressional Research Service.
Great.
Which is a subject for a whole other video. It is the best research source you're going to find. Just hands down. Every time, use that. Every topic, I start with the Congressional Research Service. The Congressional Research Service is the research service for Congress. It's Congress's think tank. It's a nonpartisan professional research organization that provides these like research packets for Congress people. Congress
Persons.
persons.
Whatever.
Congressional people. Congressmen and representatives. And, the men and women of Congress. So the idea is that when some Democrat on one side of the aisle and some Republican on the other side of the aisle are debating something, they have a packet in front of them that both of them can rely is the most legally sound and factually accurate research for them to like use as the basis for the entire discussion, right? So it's the best research.
And very historically contextual because a lot of it comes from the Library of Congress.
Right.
So they have records that the public
Just
has
doesn't
but
have
wouldn't
access.
even... Well, has...
Well,
yeah,
sure,
you know what I mean.
sure.
Yeah, wouldn't get access to.
And really high quality. And so an authorization for use of military force, who authorizes that? It is by Congress. It is Congress authorizing the president to use military force. So then it stands to reason that Congress, the Congressional Research Service, saying this is what an authorization for use of military force is, this is what it does, is
The most field contextual.
the most field contextual, legally accurate, legally binding thing there is. It is like it's been asked by Congress. What does our authorization for use of military force mean, and what does it do? It does not take that long to find it, and I would think that if that is the entire topic of your debate, you would either know what it is, or you would have researched it for longer than a day, which is what I did, right? So, first of all, the current AUMF is a meaningless statement because at the time, and I think still today, there are 3 current AUMFs. There are 3 authorizations for use of military force that are still in effect.
And,
So-
like, just to be clear, a lot of people disagreed. We've talked to a ton of people on this. They're like, oh, there weren't 3, there aren't 3, there's just one, there's one. There's absolutely
100
million% are 3.
You,
2 of them were never rescinded.
never rescinded. They're current. That's what that word means. And if you wanted it to mean one specifically, why don't you just say which one? Why don't you just say, here is the AUMF we're talking about? Whatever. Many people didn't even know that AUMF was like, that there were several. Whatever. That's not the frustrating part. The frustrating part is Congress says, AUMFs are not a source of power to the president. They say, in their own words, us giving an AUMF, us passing an AUMF, does not give the president power. The president already has the power to do this. They could do it without us passing anything, and there would be nothing that we could do, and all we are doing is symbolically showing support. So that's already created a problem. Additionally, of the last, like, going back in, there's a Congressional Research Service has a list of conflicts and wars and everything that the every conflict that the United States military has been involved with. 11 of them had AUMFs and like 270 didn't.
Yes.
So clearly, not having an AUMF, even if Congress said, yeah, an AUMF is real, the entire premise of the debate is supposed to be that without the AUMF, the president would not be able to do something, which 99% of the time has shown is not the case. So not only in the Congress's own words, but in practice, the AUMF has nothing to do with the power of the president. So I was like, whatever, these kids aren't gonna...
They're not willing to get this angry and rowdy.
But I was like, I'm hired to write an AF and a neg. I'm going to write an AF and a neg that makes sense to me. And at first I couldn't think of the neg, but these I think were, in my humble opinion, the best cases written on this topic. Like, I wrote this, I handed it to these 11-year-old kids, and I was like, listen, what I have handed you is the best case anyone has written. The affirmative is pretty straightforward. It was... the negative was pretty straightforward because it just said it doesn't give the president too much power.
Because it doesn't give him any at all.
Because it doesn't give him any power. And then it was just very clear. Here's, like, it had cards on, here's what the Congressional Research Service says. Here is why the Congressional Research Service is the best source. Here is why this is allowed in this debate. Here is why you have to look at this, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, pretty foolproof. And then I outdid myself and I think wrote the best debate AF of my career, which is on, okay, how does it give too much power if it doesn't give any power? Did I tell you about this? Do you remember this?
I'm sure you did. I can't remember it.
Genius. All right? Like, this is the level of research really that you should be encouraging, right? Pause the video home and try to figure out how could an AUMF that is purely symbolic and by the words of Congress itself doesn't give any power to the president.
Sorry, I want to. That's not an exaggeration. It straight up says, like, it's like
not
a congressman being quoted.
President. Yeah,
it was like Bob Dole or something. Or like,
it would just they straight up said our AUMFs do not give power to the president. The president already has the power. This is not a source of power. Great. How could that give too much power to the president if it in and of itself doesn't give any power to the president? Unpause because I am a goddamn genius. So it was judicial check back. You remember?
Oh, I do remember. Yeah.
So what I did the research, and there's 2 papers written on this ever. This was like, I found like the one. It was like the some law review from the 70s, and I found like the photocopied of the whatever. So what it said was that there used to be a lot of instances of courts.
Oh, I just totally remember that with the sawmill. Yeah.
Stopping the president from doing something that they thought was wrong, bad, unconstitutional, some war power that was excessive or bad. The courts would do that. But a Supreme Court case happened where, as a result of it, the precedence was set where courts could not overrule 2/3 of the checks and balance, like 2/3 of the parts
Congress
of government.
And the president.
Right? So basically, courts can intervene and stop the president only when Congress has not weighed in. And it doesn't have to be formal. If they've said, we approve of this, then courts cannot break in. So all you had to prove was that there are people who want to sue the president and stop him from doing something with this war power. That lawsuit would probably be successful, and there's a long precedence of things like that being successful, all of which were true. But the barrier to them being able to sue is the AUMF, because even though it doesn't give the power the president, gives the president the power to do it, it creates a shield from them being stopped by the courts, whether it's intended to or not. And I doubt that case would have gone very far at high-level tournaments, because people are just like, well, that's not really what this topic should be about, or blah, blah, blah. But to me, like, I learned a lot about the AUMF, and I'm probably guessing that
case has nothing to do with authorizing the use of military force.
Nothing to do what any other team is arguing, right?
Yeah.
But I guarantee that those two cases have the most nuance and the most accurate information on what an AUMF is and what it works. And to me, that's what a debate topic is supposed to be creating, right? It's supposed to be like, here is the thing that you're going to go out and research and find something that blows other people's minds with. But public forum doesn't seem to want that. But if you don't want that, why didn't you just say which AUMF and like, what do you mean by too much power? Like, just the president should be allowed to do this. The president should not be allowed to do this. Just say that.
Which brings me to a good topic from this year.
Yeah.
A topic that sounds roughly the same, but is a bad topic. And I want us to talk about how we would fix the second one. So can I give you those?
I'm ready.
Great.
I think
Best
I know
topic
which
of the
one
year.
you're talking about.
The United States should end its arms sales to Saudi Arabia.
Mm-hmm.
What does the AF have to do? Well, it has to defend the United States ending its arms sales to Saudi Arabia. What's the least...
Which, by the way, are happening. Like,
yes.
Arms sales are happening.
You should
the AF changes the status quo. Now it's
in a specific way.
In a specific way.
Now,
you end them.
Where's the variation? Could you say ends? Well, does ends mean current or does it mean forever? Does that prevent us from having new ones? Blah, blah, blah.
Does it end all of its arms sales? Does it end some of its arms sales?
And you're right. That's still a problem, but that's a problem because topicality doesn't exist in PF. That's not a problem because of the topic itself. This topic is 100% debatable with a fair division of ground for either side of it, right? I think there's a lot of literature that would indicate this is a good thing, that's a bad thing, etc.
I think the only reason not to say you end all arms deals with Saudi Arabia forever or until some condition is met, the only reason not to say that is debate strategy. It has nothing to do with the topic being unclear or the research base being whatever, right? Yeah. You're just trying to be tricksy with it at that point.
Yeah. Which brings me
whatever. I'm willing to wave my hand and say to people, don't do that. Whatever.
Which brings me to topic that sounds 80%, 90% the same. Terrible topic. We'll fix it.
Yeah.
Resolved. The United States federal government should prioritize reducing the federal debt over promoting economic growth.
Wait, there was another. I thought you were going with another. Wait, sorry. Go to.
That was February was Saudi Arabia. January is.
No. Go to. We'll talk about the other one, but there was another. That was public forum.
Yeah.
Check out LD's topic like February or January
of this year or of last year.
Yeah. So one of them was end arms sales to Saudi Arabia.
Well, that was PF we just did.
Yeah. So end arms sales
There's
to Saudi
violent
Arabia.
revolution, illegal use of drugs ought be
before.
Military aid to authoritarian regimes.
Yep.
Resolved. The United States ought not provide military aid to authoritarian regimes.
Great. So you have a clear good topic, end arms sales to Saudi Arabia. And then you have another unclear bad topic in this context, which is end military aid to authoritarian regimes. And the reason it's bad in this topic is because this is LD. I mean, LD
T at least exists.
T exists, but not everywhere, you know? And, like, so then there's all of these questions of, like, what is an authoritarian regime?
What is military aid?
What is military aid? Like, other formats of debate just make this part of the debate, and it's the T debate, and then you figure it out, and you get good at it, and if you don't want to lose the T debate, then don't run those cases, and so on, right? But in a format, like, if we were going from a very for a very traditional approach to it, right? Like, they wrote this with a specific thing in mind, right?
So
Like,
just
what
say
was
which
the
regime.
just say which regime and what kind of military aid, right? Like, because if I'm writing a parley affirmative on this, right, I'm not going to end arms sales to Saudi Arabia. Why would I do that, right? Why would I do the most predictable version of it and be like, great, an authoritarian regime is...
Yeah, you'd be like, we're going to end training for Plan Colombia in Latin America or something.
Right,
instead.
exactly. Something that the negative just isn't going to have anything ready for. And then once they, like, run their topicality that says, like, this isn't predictable, I'll be like, sure, but it's topical, right? Yeah. And so, anyway, like, it doesn't make sense to me to say, like, here's a super broad topic, but talk about this. So now let's talk about the other public forum topic that you were...
The United States federal government should prioritize reducing the federal debt over promoting economic growth. So, let's talk about some problems with this. One, prioritize.
Yeah.
Does prioritize mean at the expense of?
Yeah.
Does prioritize mean just more than? Right?
Yeah, like those two things aren't mutually exclusive, right? So is it saying do both but do one more than the other? Or is it saying don't do one, do the other?
Secondary problem. Does it follow that promoting economic growth reduces the federal debt? Like, the more growth we have, the more ability we have to resolve the federal debt, right? But the opposite is not necessarily true for the other side of the topic, right? Reducing the debt does not necessarily grow the economy. Or does it, right, by a given definition?
And what does it mean to promote economic growth? Does that mean grow the economy?
Yeah, does that mean jobs? Does that mean GDP? Does that mean GDP per capita?
There was a similar housing one. Can you find the housing? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
Finish on this.
Well, so what I want to go, though, is, so how would you fix this topic? If the debate they want you to have is we need to focus on reducing federal debt, the resolution should be the United States federal government should enact a program which reduces the federal debt, which significantly reduces.
Yeah.
Like, that's it. There's no reason to have over promoting something else.
Yeah.
Like, I think a lot of the times they're just like, well, we need two things in this topic to give the other side ground. It's like, that's not how it works.
Right.
That means your topic was bad because you probably wanted to talk about the first thing.
And then you're like, what is the other side?
Yeah, there's no balance to it, and so you went to the other one. Let me go to the housing
Yeah.
topic for you. Housing. Oh, wait, that was more recent. That was like...
Yeah, it was pretty recent. January, February, March.
Got it. The United States should promote the development of market rate housing in urban neighborhoods.
To promote development, what does that mean? Does it say develop housing? No, promote the development of market rate housing. What?
Sell the land for cheap?
Or no, like what does? Yeah, like what does it mean to promote the development of something, right? And like market rate housing. How do you like?
That market?
Here's the thing. Here's the thing. Like, market rate means that it wasn't subsidized or intervened in any way. If someone took an action
To promote, yeah.
you are inherently making it not market. So the only way to do it is if that action is negative. If it's removing something, right? So if your promotion of market rate housing is taking away something that was preventing market rate housing, because otherwise anything, if you sell the land for cheap, that's no longer market rate housing. That's subsidized housing, right? So the only like real topical AF in my 2 days I spent thinking about this is you end rent control. You like abolish rent control in places that have
Which is
rent
bad.
control. Well, which is not a great, But if that is that what you were thinking? Like what did?
Yeah, why wouldn't you make the resolution abolish rent control?
But also just the person who wrote this. What did they mean? What do
I
you
think
mean?
that they could solve a lot.
What were they thinking was going to be advocated
Well, I think
for?
I think they might even have topic papers in some way, but it just seems like the process isn't as refined and is not like necessarily crowdsourced and just.
I think the
But
problem
like,
is that there's.
how could the word tech giants even make it through any draft process?
I think the problem is they want to have breadth and depth. They want to have a wide array of people understand what, like, for example, the NFALD topic this year. Do you know off the top of your head?
United States federal government should significantly increase action by United States Cyber Command to prevent complex catastrophe and or critical infrastructure collapse, or I might have the last part reversed.
To prevent complex catastrophe and or protect critical infrastructure.
Yes, yeah.
So let's say you come home from school and your mom's like, Polly, how was debate class? What are you guys debating? And you say, oh, it's the United States federal government should, what's the verb?
Significantly increase action, right?
It should significantly increase action by the United States Cyber Command to prevent complex catastrophe and or protect critical infrastructure. And she's like, what is complex catastrophe or critical infrastructure or Cyber Command? Why would the United States, why don't you just say that Cyber Command does it and blah, 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 right? It's just not, like, it doesn't appeal, it doesn't have a broad appeal, right? If you go to, like...
It's not for rando parents.
Right, it's not for a lay audience, right? If you, like, are hosting an event, right, and you're like, come in and watch this debate, and they're like, what's the debate? You don't want to say the United States federal government should significantly
That's why
increase
speech night topics are always like e-cigarettes, good or bad.
Right, exactly. That's why when we have like on-campus events, when we're like having a demonstration debate, it's just like, should we have smoking on campus? But the thing is, in those showcase debates, we tell the sides what they should be advocating for.
Showcase debate looks a startling amount like PF.
I know. It's like what like PF like sort of wants to be, but
that's funny.
Yeah. But so on the other hand, right? Like with a public forum topic, it's something that like would entice students not doing debate to do debate potentially, and would entice people to go watch this debate. Oh, I'll check that out. Ooh, sounds interesting. So they want to have that sort of like, for lack of a better term, like sexy phrasing, where it's like an appealing phrasing, but you can't have that and the level of like structural integrity and the technical structural integrity of this sentence. And the only way to resolve that right now is to just sort of do this hand waving and say, no, that's not what public forum's about. No, you shouldn't do it. But that is a guaranteed way to have your event have exactly what happened to every other event happen to it. And this is a subject for another video, but here's what happens. You start a debate event and you say, forget what the rules are, because the rules don't create this type of behavior. Look at this thing and try to do it that way. Like the spirit of this event is that you should do it this way. And then some people do it that way, some people don't. And then some people start changing it and they start succeeding. And then they come back and they become coaches and they become judges. And then those people start getting more people to do it that way. And as long as it's getting success, more and more of the people who stay for a long time and end up coming back to it tend to do the more nuanced, technical way because it's successful. And then gradually the event gets faster. Gradually it gets more complicated. You start getting things like K's in PF. You start getting things like T in PF. And gradually speaking, when you can't justify why, through a system of rules, your event needs to be done a certain way, it will not be done that way as long as people can win doing another way. And I promise you that these techniques that people doing PF, the techniques that they don't want coming into PF, are logically sound. Not all of them. The case kind of, but like as far as their argumentative power, they've been in other formats of debate for 30 and 40 years, just getting
I think it's
and
time
more,
for T. I really do think it's time for T.
right?
and
Just
BF,
like
dude.
there you go. Like
If it
the
wasn't
more
for
you have
parents,
problems
it already
like
would
this,
be there. If it wasn't for parents, it'd already be there. 100%.
and so now the only barrier is, can you explain T to parents? And if you can, congrats on your win. The only answer to that becomes, well, you're not supposed to do it. And then maybe some regional organization will be like, T's aren't allowed. Just like they're like, counter plans aren't allowed. That doesn't, like, counter plans aren't allowed. So now people will say, this isn't a counter plan. This is a counter advocacy, or it's an opportunity cost, or it's whatever. Because, anyway, now we're fully off topic. But the point is that not addressing these issues has consequences for your debate format. If you can't justify why the debate should happen the way you're asking for it to happen,
It won't happen that way.
it won't happen that way. No matter how much you complain about it. And maybe it's a gradual start, but it'll snowball. And you already have people doing more technical things in public forum. It's on the precipice. Once these people start winning, everyone will start doing it, and it'll be game over.
Yeah, so basically, regulations aren't laws, read T.